Welcome back to Dirk Gently's Holistic Detective Agency. It's Mr. Humphrey here, and we're now on to Chapter 8. Come in, dear fellow, come in. The door to Reg's set of rooms in college was up a winding set of wooden stairs in the corner of Second Court, and was not well lit. Or rather, it was perfectly well lit when the light was working, but the light was not working, so the door was not well lit, and was, furthermore, locked. Reg was having difficulty in finding the key from a collection which looked like something that a fit ninja warrior could hurl through a tree trunk. Rooms in the older part of the college have double doors, like airlocks, and like airlocks they're fiddly to open. The outer door is a sturdy slab of grey painted oak, with no features other than a very narrow slit for letters and a Yale lock, to which suddenly Reg at last found the key. He unlocked it and pulled it open. Behind it lay an ordinary white panelled door with an ordinary brass doorknob. Come in, repeated Reg, opening this and fumbling for a light switch. For a moment, only the dying embers of a fire in the stone grate threw ghostly red shadows dancing around the room, but the electric light flooded in and extinguished the magic. Reg hesitated on the threshold for a moment, oddly tense, as if wishing to be sure of something before he entered. Then he bustled in with at least the appearance of cheeriness. It was a large panelled room, with a collection of gently shabby furniture contrived to fill quite comfortably. Against the far wall stood a large and battered old mahogany table, with fat, ugly legs, which was laden with books, files, folders, and teetering piles of paper. Standing in its own space on the desk, Richard was amused to note, was actually a battered old abacus. There was a small Regency writing desk standing nearby, which might have been quite valuable had it not been knocked about so much, also a couple of elegant Georgian chairs, a portentous Victorian bookcase, and so on. It was, in short, a Don's room. It had a Don's framed map and prints on the walls, a threadbare and faded Don's carpet on the floor, and it looked as if little had changed in it for decades, which was probably the case because a Don had lived in it. Two doors led out from either end of the opposite wall, and Richard knew from previous visits that one led to a study, which looked much like a smaller, more intense version of this room, larger clumps of books, taller piles of paper, and more imminent danger of actually falling, furniture which, however old and valuable, was heavily marked with myriad rings of hot tea or coffee cups, on which many of the original cups themselves were probably still standing. The other door led to a small and rather basically equipped kitchen, and a twisty internal staircase at the top of which lay the professor's bedroom and bathroom. "Try to make yourself comfortable on the sofa," invited Reg, fussing around hospitably. "I don't know if you'll manage. It always feels to me like it's been stuffed with cabbage leaves and cutlery." He peered at Richard seriously. "Do you have a good sofa?" he inquired. "Well, yes," Richard laughed. He was cheered by the silliness of the question. "Oh," said Reg solemnly. "Well, I wish you'd tell me where you got it. I have endless trouble with them, quite endless. Never found a comfortable one in all my life. How did you find yours?" He encountered, with a slight air of surprise, a small silver tray he had left out with a decanter of port and 3 glasses. "Well, it's odd you should ask that," said Richard. "I've never sat on it." "Oh, very wise," insisted Reg earnestly. "Very, very wise." He went through a palaver similar to his previous one with his coat and hat. "Not that I wouldn't like to," said Richard. "It's just that it's stuck halfway up a long flight of stairs which leads up to my flat. As far as I can make it out, the delivery men got it part way up the stairs, got it stuck, turned around any way they could, couldn't get it any further, and then found, curiously enough, that they couldn't get it back down again. Now, that should be impossible." "Odd," agreed Reg. "I've certainly never come across an irreversible mathematics involving sofas. Could be a new field. Have you spoken to any spatial geometricians?" "I did better than that. I called in a neighbour's kid, who used to be able to solve Rubik's Cubes in 17 seconds. He sat on the step and stared at it for an hour before pronouncing it irrevocably stuck. Admittedly, he's had a few years older now and has found out about girls, but it's got me puzzled. Carry on talking, dear fellow. I'm most interested, but let me know first if there's anything I can get you. Port, perhaps, or brandy? The port, I think, is better a bet. Laid down by the college in 1934. One of the finest vintages, I think you'll find. And on the other hand, I don't actually have any brandy. Or coffee, or some more wine, perhaps. There's an excellent Margot I've been looking for an excuse to open, though it should, of course, be allowed to stand open for an hour or two, which is not to say that I couldn't. No, he said hurriedly, probably best not to go for the Margot tonight. Tea is what I would really like, said Richard, if you have some. Reg raised an eyebrow. Are you sure? I have to drive home. Indeed. Then I shall be a moment or two in the kitchen. Please carry on. I shall be able to hear you. Continue to tell me of your sofa, and do feel free in the meantime to sit on mine. Has it been stuck there for long? Oh, only about 3 weeks, said Richard, sitting down. I could just saw it up and throw it away, but I can't believe that there isn't a logical answer. And it also made me think. It would be really useful to know before you buy a piece of furniture whether it's actually going to fit up the stairs and round the corner. So I've modelled the problem in 3 dimensions on my computer, and so far it just says no way. It says what? Called Reg over the noise of filling the kettle. Can't be done. I told it to compute the moves necessary to get the sofa out, and it says there aren't any. I said, what? And it said there aren't any. Then I asked it, and this is the mysterious thing, to compute the moves necessary to get the sofa into its present position in the first place, and it said that it couldn't have got there. Not without fundamentally restructuring of the walls. So either there's something wrong with the fundamental structure of matter in my walls, or, he added with a sigh, there's something wrong with the program. Which would you guess? And are you married? Called Reg. What? Oh, I see what you mean. Sofa stuck on your stairs for a month. Well, no, not married as such, but yes, there is a specific girl that I'm not married to. What's she like? What does she do? She's a professional cellist. I have to admit that the sofa has been a bit of a talking point. In fact, she's moved back to her own flat until I get it sorted out. Well, he was suddenly sad, and he stood up and wandered around the room in a desultory sort of way, and ended up in front of the dying fire. He gave it a bit of a poke and threw on a couple of extra logs to try and ward off the chill of the room. She's Gordon's sister, in fact, he added at last, but they are very different. I'm not sure she really approves of computers very much, and she doesn't much like his attitude to money. I don't think I entirely blame her. Actually, she doesn't know half of it. Which is the half that she doesn't know? Richard sighed. Well, he said, it's to do with a project which first made the software incarnation of the company profitable. It was called Reason, and in its own way, it was sensational. What was it? Well, it was a kind of back-to-front program. It's funny how many of the best ideas are just an old idea back to front. You see, there have always been several programs written that help you to arrive at a destination by properly ordering and analysing all the relevant facts so that they then point naturally towards the right decision. The drawback with these is that the decision which all the properly ordered and analysed facts point to is not necessarily the one you want. Yes, said Reg's voice from the kitchen. Well, Gordon's great insight was to design a program which allowed you to specify in advance what decision you wished to reach, and only then give it all the facts. The program's task, which was able to accomplish with consummate ease, was simply to construct a plausible series of logical sounding steps to connect the premises with the conclusion. And I have to say, it worked brilliantly. Gordon was able to buy himself a Porsche almost immediately, despite being completely broke and a hopeless driver. Even his bank manager was able to find fault with his reasoning, even when Gordon wrote it off 3 weeks later. Heavens! And did the program sell very well? Nope, we never sold a single copy. You astonish me. It sounds like a real winner to me. It was, said Richard hesitantly. The entire project was brought up lock, stock and barrel by the Pentagon. The deal put Way Forward on a very sound financial footing. Its moral foundation, on the other hand, is not something I would want to trust my weight to. I've recently been analysing a lot of the arguments put forward in favour of the Star Wars project, and if you know what you're looking for, the pattern of the algorithms is very clear. So much so, in fact, that looking at Pentagon policies over the last couple of years, I think I can be fairly sure that the US Navy is using version 2.0 of the program, while the Air Force, for some reason, only has the beta test version of 1.5. Hold that. Do you have a copy? Oh, certainly not, said Richard. I wouldn't have anything to do with it. Anyway, when the Pentagon bought everything, they bought everything. Every scrap of code, every disk, every notebook. I was glad to see the back of it. If indeed we have, I just busy myself with my own projects. He poked at the fire again and wondered what he was doing here when he had so much work on. Gordon was on at him continually about getting the new super version of Anthem ready to take advantage of the Macintosh 2, and he was well behind with it. And as for the proposed module for converting incoming Dow Jones stock market information into MIDI data in real time, he'd only meant that as a joke. But Gordon, of course, had flipped over the idea and insisted on it being implemented. That too was meant to be ready, but wasn't. He suddenly knew exactly why he was here. Well, it had been a pleasant evening, even if he couldn't see why Reg had been quite keen to see him. He picked up a couple of books from the table. The table obviously doubled as a dining table because, although the piles looked as if they'd been there for weeks, the absence of dust immediately around them showed that they had been moved recently. Maybe, he thought, the need for an amiable chit-chat with someone different can become as urgent as any other need when you live in a community as enclosed as a Cambridge college was, even nowadays. He was a likeable old fellow, but it was clear from the dinner that many of his colleagues found his eccentricities formed rather a rich, sustained diet, particularly when they had so many of their own to contend with. A thought about Susan nagged him, but he was used to that. He flipped through the two books he'd picked up. One of them, an elderly one, was an account of the hauntings of Borley Rectory, the most haunted house in England. Its spine was getting raggedy, and the photographic plates were so grey and blurry as to be virtually indistinguishable. A picture he thought must be a very lucky, or faked, shot of a ghost or apparition turned out, when he examined the caption, to be a portrait of the author. The other book was more recent, and, by an odd coincidence, was a guide to the Greek islands. He thumbed through it idly, and a piece of paper fell out. "Earl Grey or Lapsang Souchong," called out Reg, "or Darjeeling or PG Tips. It's all tea bags anyway, I'm afraid, and none of them very fresh." "Darjeeling will do fine," replied Richard, stooping to pick up the piece of paper. "Milk?" called Reg. Please." "1 lump or 2?" "1, please." Richard slipped the paper back into the book, noticing as he did so that it had a hurriedly scribbled note on it. The note said, oddly enough, "Regard this simple silver salt cellar. Regard this simple hat." "Sugar?" What?" said Richard, startled. He put the book hurriedly back into the pile. Just a tiny joke of mine," said Reg cheerily. "See if people are listening." He emerged beaming from the kitchen, carrying a small tray with 2 cups on it, which he hurled suddenly on the floor. The tea splashed over the carpet. One of the cups shattered, and the other one bounded on the table. Reg leaned against the doorframe, white-faced and staring. A frozen instant of time slipped silently by, while Richard was too startled to react. Then he leapt awkwardly forward to help, but the old man was already apologising and offering to make him enough for a cup of tea. Richard helped him to the sofa. "Are you all right?" asked Richard helplessly. "Shall I get a doctor?" Reg waved him down. "It's all right," he insisted. "I'm perfectly well. Thought I heard, well, a noise that startled me, but it was nothing. Just overcome with tea fumes, I expect. Let me just catch my breath. I think a little port will revive me excellently. So sorry, didn't mean to startle you." He waved in the general direction of the port decanter. Richard hurriedly poured a small glass and gave it to him. "What kind of noise?" he asked, wondering what on earth could shook him so much. At the moment, at that moment, came the sound of movement upstairs, an extraordinary kind of heavy breathing noise. "That!" whispered Reg. The glass of port lay shattered at his feet. Upstairs, someone seemed to be stamping. "Did you hear it?" Well, yes. This seemed to relieve the old man. Richard looked nervously up at the ceiling. "Is there someone up there?" he asked, feeling this was a lame question, but one that had to be asked. "No," said Reg in a low voice that shocked Richard with the fear it carried. "No one. Nobody that should be there." Then Reg was struggling shakily to his feet, but there was suddenly a fierce determination about him. "I must go up there," he said quietly. "I must. Please wait for me here." "Look, what is this?" demanded Richard, standing between Reg and the doorway. "What is this? A burglar? Look, I'll go. I'm sure there is nothing. It's just wind or something." Richard didn't know why he was saying this. It clearly wasn't the wind, or anything like the wind, because though the wind might conceivably make a heavy breathing noise, it rarely stamped his feet in that way. "No," the old man said, politely but firmly, moving him aside. "It is for me to do." Richard followed him helplessly through the door into the small hallway beyond which lay the tiny kitchen. A dark wooden staircase led up from here. The steps seemed damaged and scruffed. Reg turned on a light. It was a dim one that hung naked at the top of the stairwell, and he looked up at it with grim apprehension. "Wait here," he said, and walked up 2 steps. He then turned and faced Richard with a look of the most profound seriousness on his face. "I'm sorry," he said, "that you have become involved in what is the more difficult side of my life. But you are involved now, regrettably though that may be, and there is something I must ask you to do. I do not know what awaits me up there. I do not know exactly. I do not know if it is something which I have foolishly brought upon myself with my hobbies, or if it is something to which I have fallen an innocent victim. If it is the former, then I have only myself to blame, for I am like a doctor who cannot give up smoking, or perhaps worse still, like an ecologist who cannot give up his car. If the latter, then I hope it may not happen to you. What I must ask you is this. When I come back down these stairways, always supposing, of course, that I do, then if my behaviour strikes you as being in any way odd, if I appear not to be myself, then you must leap on me and wrestle me to the ground. Do you understand? You must prevent me from doing anything I may try to do." "But how will I know?" asked an incredulous Richard. "Sorry, I don't mean to sound like that, but I don't know what." "You will know," said Reg. "Now, please wait for me in the main room and close the door." Shaking his head in bewilderment, Richard stepped back, and as he did what he was asked, from inside the large untidy room he listened for the sound of the Professor's tread mounting the stairs one at a time. He mounted them with heavy deliberation, like the ticking of a great slow clock. Richard heard him reach the top landing. There he paused in silence. Seconds went by, maybe 5, maybe 10, maybe 20. Then came again the heavy movement and the breath that had first so harrowed the Professor. Richard moved quickly to the door, but did not open it. The chill of the room oppressed and disturbed him. He shook his head to try and shake off the feeling, and then held his breath as the footsteps started once again, slowly, to traverse the 2 yards of the landing and to pause there again. After only a few seconds, this time, Richard heard the long, slow squeak of a door being opened inch by inch by inch by cautious inch, until it must surely now at last be standing wide agape. Nothing further seemed to happen for a long, long time. Then at last the door closed once again, slowly. The footsteps crossed the landing and paused again. Richard backed a few slight paces from the door, staring fixedly at it. Once more the footsteps started to descend the stairs, slowly, deliberately, and quietly, until at last they reached the bottom. Then after a few seconds more, the door handle began to rotate. The door opened, and Reg walked calmly in. "It's all right. Just a horse in the bathroom," he said quietly. Richard leapt on him and wrestled him to the ground. "No!" gasped Reg. "No, get off me! Let me go! I'm perfectly all right, damn it! It's just a horse. A perfectly ordinary horse." He shook Richard off with no great difficulty and sat up, puffing and blowing and pushing his hands through his limited hair. Richard stood over him, warily but with a great deal of mounting embarrassment. He edged back and let Reg stand up and sit on the chair. "Just a horse, but thank you for taking me at my word." He brushed himself down. "A horse," repeated Richard. "Yes," said Reg. Richard went out and looked up the stairs, and then came back in. "A horse," he said again. "Yes, it is," said the Professor. "Wait." He motioned to Richard, who was about to go out again and investigate. "Let it be. It won't be long." Richard stared in disbelief. "You say there's a horse in your bathroom, and all you can do is stand there naming Beatles songs?" The Professor looked blankly at him. "Listen," he said. "I'm sorry if I alarmed you earlier. It was just a slight turn. These things happen, my dear fellow. Don't go upsetting yourself about it. Dear me, I've known odder things in my time, many of them far odder. She's only a horse, for heaven's sake. I'll go and let her out later. Please don't concern yourself. Let us revive our spirits with some port." "But how did it get in there?" "Well, the bathroom window's open. I expect she came through that." Richard looked at him, not for the first time, and certainly not for the last time, through eyes that were narrowed with suspicion. "You're doing it deliberately, aren't you?" he said. "Doing what, my dear fellow?" "I don't believe there's a horse in your bathroom," said Richard suddenly. "I don't know what is there. I don't know what you're doing. I don't know what any of this evening means, but I don't believe there's a horse in your bathroom." And brushing aside Reggie's further protestations, he went up to look. The bathroom was not large. The walls were panelled in old oak linen fold, which probably, given the age and nature of the building, was quite probably priceless, but otherwise the fittings were stark and institutional. There was an old scuffed black and white checked linoleum on the floor, a small basic bath, well cleaned, but with very elderly stains and chips in the enamel, and also a small basic basin, with a toothbrush and toothpaste and a Duralex beaker standing next to the taps. Screwed into the probably priceless panelling above the basin was a tin mirror-fronted bathroom cabinet. It looked as if it had been repainted many times, and the mirror was stained around the edges with condensation. The lavatory had an old-fashioned cast-iron chain-pull cistern. There was an old cream-painted wooden cupboard standing in the corner, with an old brown bentwood chair next to it, on which lay some neatly folded but threadbare small towels. There was also a large horse in the room, taking up most of it. Richard stared at it, and it stared at Richard, in an appraising kind of way. Richard swayed slightly. The horse stood quite still. After a while it looked at the cupboard instead. It seemed, if not content, then at least perfectly resigned to being where it was until it was put somewhere else. It also seemed... what was it? It was bathed in the glow of the moonlight that streamed through the window. The window was open, but small, and was, besides, on the second floor, so the notion that the horse had entered by that route was entirely fanciful. There was something odd about the horse, but he couldn't say what. Well, there was one thing that was clearly very odd about it indeed, which was it was standing in a college bathroom. Maybe that was all. He reached out, rather tentatively, to pat the creature on its neck. Felt normal, firm, glossy. It was in good condition. The effect of the moonlight on its coat was a little mazy, but everything looked a little odd by moonlight. The horse shook its mane a little when he touched it, but didn't seem to mind too much. After the success of patting it, Richard stroked it a few times and scratched it gently under the jaw. Then he noticed that there was another door into the bathroom in the far corner. He moved cautiously around the horse and approached the other door. He backed up against it and pushed it open tentatively. It just opened into the professor's bedroom, a small room cluttered with books and shoes and a small single bed. This room, too, had another door, which opened out onto the landing again. Richard noticed that the floor of the landing was newly scuffed and scratched as the stairs had been, and these marks were consistent with the idea that the horse had somehow been pushed up the stairs. He wouldn't have liked to have had to do it himself, and he would have liked to have been the horse having it done to him even less, but it was just about possible. But why? He had one look at the horse, which had one look back at him, and then he returned downstairs. "I agree," he said. "You have a horse in your bathroom, and I will, after all, have a little port." He poured himself some, and then some for Reg, who was quietly contemplating the fire and was in need of a refill. "Just as well I did put out 3 glasses, after all," said Reg chattily. "I wondered why earlier, now I remember. You asked if you could bring a friend, but apparently not to have done so, on account of the sofa, no doubt. Never mind, these things happen. Oh, not too much, you'll spill it." All horse-related questions left Richard's mind abruptly. "I did," he said. "Oh, yes, I remember now. You rang me back to ask me if it would be all right, as I recall. I said I would be charmed, and fully intended to be. I'd saw the thing up if I were you. Don't want to sacrifice your happiness to a sofa. Or maybe she decided that an evening with your old tutor would be blisteringly dull, and opted for the more exhilarating course of washing her hair instead. Dear me, I know what that would have done. It only lacks of hair these days that forced me to pursue such a hectic social round these days." It was Richard's turn to be white-faced and staring. Yes, he had assumed that Susan would not want to come. Yes, he had said that to her, that it would be terribly dull. But she had insisted that she wanted to come because it would be the only way she'd get to see his face for a few minutes, not bathed in the light of a computer screen. So he had agreed and arranged that it would bring her after all. Only, he'd completely forgotten this. He had not picked her up. He said, "Can I use your phone, please?"